Okay, we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the third fireside chat in our series of webinars. We're excited, as we have been, to continue bringing this series of informational chats to all of you to help through these challenging times we're all obviously experiencing together. I'm Frank Niesenbaum, VP of Sales for E2B Tech and C2B Tech, and I'll be your host today. Excuse me. I'm really excited and happy to be joined by Todd Tigas, who is a partner with a very respected CPA firm, UHY. Hi, Todd.
Hey, Frank.
Todd will be helping us today, hopefully understand some thoughts about accounting for the cannabis and non-cannabis companies. He has a lot of experience around both, and the 280E legislation for the cannabis industry. Hopefully this will help you in your business get some good information to help navigate through these uncertain times as well, and as well come out on the other side stronger than ever. We hope that everyone enjoys the warmth of my fireplace. Todd, unfortunately, his fire went out this morning, so he's not fireplacing with us. But we want to continue to bring you some information, help you through this pandemic. These are tough and challenging times. I've said this a number of times for all of us. But I think we all remain confident that our national spirit, our cooperation will get us all through this. And I'm encouraged, I think we might all be, by some of the positive signs we see because of our incredible social distancing adherence, which you're getting an example of today from Todd and I. But I think that will be very helpful. And that's some good things. So again, welcome, Todd. And in today's fireside, like I mentioned, we'll be talking about the accounting, the CARE Act, 280E, a lot of different topics. We're going to let Todd give us some insight. But before we begin, as typical for us, just have a couple of real quick poll questions I'd like to put out there just to gauge some information about the audience. And the first one is, did you or do you have a continuity or contingency plan in place to help you manage a crisis like we're experiencing today? So take a minute and answer that for us, just so we can get a sense of what people may have been ready for or not ready for. Okay, give another 30 seconds or so. No names are shown, so we don't know who's saying what, just trying to get a gauge. Okay, that's helpful. And now just for our sake, the second question, to kind of understand who is in the audience today, help us understand a little better. Are you a distribution business, non-cannabis, manufacturing non-cannabis, medical and healthcare related? If you are cannabis or cannabis related, maybe services, or if you find yourself in some other category, that'll be helpful as well. So just kind of throw it in there for us. That'll be helpful.
Little diverse group there.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, as well as both on the continuity and contingency side as well.
Yes.
Just wait about 10 more seconds and we'll move on. Okay, that's good information. We got a little bit of everything in there, I think. And so that is helpful. So Todd, put you on the spot. You know, obviously we're working remotely. I'm just curious, maybe give us a little peek into what time is like for you and your firm and your clients. I'm sure it's quite crazy with the new CARE Act and all the different things going on in the world and the stay-at-home situation. Just kind of give us some insight of that one.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Frank, and thank you very much for having me here today. I'm glad to be with you guys. But definitely, it's this world, our new remote reality, as we like to call it here in our firm. It's kind of crazy. We're now 4 weeks removed from being in the office, so we've had to deal with those struggles for sure in terms of working from your home office, keeping on top of things, making sure you're kind of keeping in touch with your people is so important. And then, at being April,
Yeah.
April 9th, I think today is, right? There's that April 15th deadline that we were working so hard to try and achieve. So we were in the throes of tax season and really still are. Fortunately, the president came out and they granted it an extension through Treasury, through
Yeah.
IRS, that 90-day extension for both not only the tax filings, but also payments too. So, individuals and businesses alike, if you had any tax payments that were due on that 4/15 deadline, they've extended those out for both first quarter 2020 estimates as well as any 19 taxes too. So those were extended out 90 days as well to July 15th. So, we were busy with all that. And then, lo and behold, we had all the additional new COVID-19 legislation. So that was really like drinking from a fire hose. All this legislation passed with the CARES Act. And the Family First Response Act was the first one. The CARES Act was the second one. These $2 trillion package was in that CARES Act, and all kinds of new legislation that meant we had to really digest that and kind of sink our teeth into it.
Yeah.
So, and share that knowledge then with our clients as well, because they're asking questions and trying to gain an understanding. And, legislation passes through, and, when it happens in that kind of a time frame, you're literally passing these bills in a week or less.
Right.
There's a lot of fixes that need to go along with it too. So they're really the IRS, while they pass the law, whether it be the IRS, whether it be the government or the agencies that are responsible for implementing these, they still have to figure out, the devil's in the details, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's really been some of the hiccups that we're dealing with even today in terms of these SBA loans and things of that nature. We're really just kind of trying to get our arms around that, helping our clients guide through, the legislation, and then, advising them with, the big thing here is the SBA and the Paychecks Protection Program, the
Right.
PPP loans. Those are the big things that are out there that we're really working with our clients and the banks to make sure that they're, they get their filings in on time, or as quick as possible, I should say, and they have the information needed to apply for those, to make sure they get the maximum allowable loan or grant associated with that. So it's been kind of crazy from that standpoint, for sure.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. Not to
Yeah.
mention, we have regular things that clients need too, where they have just day-to-day business, annual financials that are still required, things of
Right.
that nature that just don't stop. And
Yeah.
it's definitely been busy.
Yeah, I'll want to come back to some of that because I
Sure.
think there's some valuable stuff there.
Yeah.
But talking about you're talking about the CARES Act and the first act and the second and all these others. And I remember when we chatted about a couple of weeks ago, and you'd just gotten all the information on that. And you were talking about how it's only taking like 10 minutes to go through that 800-page document, and we were laughing about it.
Sure.
But yeah, but now you're an expert. Talking about just like the CARE Act, FASB. I did see something like there were some FASB changes coming, but just in general, like between cannabis and non-cannabis, anything specific to any of those that they should be aware of, what maybe applies or doesn't apply to some of
Yeah,
them?
for sure. So the CARES Act had a whole whole litany of different credits that were available, some worker retention credits, as well as the big thing, which are like I said, the Paycheck Protection Program loans.
Right.
Those are the loans where there's a component of forgiveness that, as it applies to using those proceeds from those loans to retain workers. The proceeds have to be used for qualified expenses, and
Right.
those are wages, healthcare benefits, rent and utilities associated with there. The 25% can be allocated to rent, utilities, and also healthcare benefits. So from that standpoint, that's a big one for a lot of the smaller businesses, which are employees of less than 500 employees, as deemed by the SBA, the Small Business Administration. So that's the big thing.
And
To your point, though, I guess about the cannabis side of things, so how do they relate there? Unfortunately, though, for cannabis-related entities that are subject to the 280E rules, because cannabis is still a federally legal activity, the guidelines are pretty specific that these credits and SBA loans do not apply towards those cannabis entities. So
wow.
that is a little bit of a, I don't say bummer, but
Yeah.
it is, they don't apply to
Yeah.
those entities. I guess the flip side to that is cannabis has been deemed an essential service in most states. So states where it's legal, so they are, a lot of them are doing, drive through, I should say, drive up deliveries, where it's the social distance, it's not a face-to-face sale, but they're doing those types of things. So they have been still retaining business, if you will. And I know a number of our clients have been still pretty busy.
Right. Well, that's good. And that's great. That's good information and a lot of help. So I wanted to follow it up a little bit. We are just, talking a little bit about, companies and, and some of the tax things and what you've just talked about, legislation. But I know also when it comes to, general business as well as cannabis, what's on a lot of people's mind, I know in the cannabis industry, because a lot of them are startups or really just getting engaged in it, maybe touch a little bit about some of the entity types that are out there and what people should think about and kind of how they organize their business.
Yeah. So, the cannabis industry is kind of a unique animal from a traditional business sense because of the rules and regulations associated with 280E. 280E is the Internal Revenue Code section that stipulates that activities from federally legal activities are non-deductible. Certain expenses are non-deductible.
Right.
So kind of the tax structures associated with those are really important when you're looking at what those non-deductible effects are, especially when we have different tax rates between the individual levels and corporation levels. The maximum corporate rate right now is 21%. Versus the maximum individual rate of 37%. So that 16% spread is quite large when you're talking, a large amount of non-deductible expenses that we see in these, cannabis-related activities, where those selling expenses are all non-deductible types of items. So we know what the marketing expenses and budgets can be for cannabis related. You'll see some of the marketing that goes on at either the dispensary levels or even at the cultivation grower levels, that there's some sizable dollar amounts that are going through there, and that marketing aspect of that is completely non-deductible. And then you get into the retail locations, the dispensaries and things of that nature, and there's even a larger amount that's non-deductible. So really entity structuring is really important. Not to mention, we look at also the way the licensing is too at some of these state levels. There's a lot of restrictions in terms of who can own, who's on the license, who can own and be a part of an entity that has a license. Requirements to also be vetted by that state as part of that licensed entity, which includes background checks, capital wherewithal, things of that nature. So structure is just so important in making sure, real estate, how is it properly sectioned off? A lot of times we'll have a whiteboard session just to maintain or develop, I should say, that entity structure. And we might end up with 5 or 6 different entities, and it's there's entities all over the place. It looked like a giant spider web when we're all done. That's for sure.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think that even along those lines, non-cannabis companies, obviously, most of them are already in business and they're going concerns.
Yeah.
So they've already chosen an entity, but there's still conversation tax-wise,
Absolutely.
liability-wise. I know that's always a big one for all of the CPA community. So I mean, obviously, we always tell them to talk to their CPA. As a non-practicing accountant, having done it when I was a lot younger, I understand the value of the CPA firm and that relationship. So it's important.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to follow up because you talked about, especially as it's related to cannabis, is the way the accounting is structured. Talk about the general ledger, because you can't be in compliance if you can't report it and you can't understand it, or maybe you're doing it wrong because it's not set up right. Maybe just touch on that a little bit in terms of how that might be structured, how important that is.
Yeah, well, accounting is regardless of what type of industry you're in, the accounting for the day-to-day activity is so important. Just to good company records, to make for year-end preparation of tax returns, financial statements, for banking needs. Like I said, the annual tax filings you're going to have regardless of what industry you're in. If you touch then into the cannabis industry, it becomes even more important with the 280E limitations. Obviously, there's certain things that are deductible, things that are components of inventory. And that tracking is really just so important to make sure that you're capturing those inventoriable costs that would be deemed deductible under the rules of 280E and 471. Those are the code sections that relate to that. But where it's just, so important to have a good general ledger system and make sure that availability is there to be able to be tracked, so that when it comes time for tax filings, the year end, right now we're working a lot with our year end, December year end clients to get that information so we can prepare the tax returns. And when it's just lumped into, one account, well, that one account, if there's ever an IRS audit, the IRS is going to want to see where the details are.
Right.
And, a lump sum just doesn't cut it in the eyes of the IRS. And they turn around and say, well, this is going to be non-deductible. And you've got one big non-deductible expense in there. And that doesn't do you much good in terms of saving tax dollars by any means.
Yeah, that's great advice and good conversation. I know that there's a lot of court cases out there nationally and other things with companies that didn't do it right and they're hung up forever, and it's costing them a lot of money. And so along those lines, one of the questions we asked about was continuity or contingency plans, and I know that we all talk about it in terms of we did a webinar a couple of days ago about supply chain and that type of thing, but when it relates to their accounting needs, and obviously in this time of remote working, and yes, businesses are open, whether they're essential or they can work because they're working remotely. There are accounting things, and I'm just curious in terms of your experience, are you seeing, more to the cloud, less to the cloud, people adopting the cloud or thinking about it? Are you seeing any reaction around that in your work?
Oh, sure. For a lot. Technology, the way technology has just kind of come in the last 5-10 years, it's amazing where, now almost everyone in their home has high-speed internet, working from their home place. And there's been so much software that's now all cloud-based. Back in the old days, call it 15 years ago, we're dating ourselves here, Frank.
Not even that long, right?
You used to have, backups were on a tape drive.
Right.
That you would have to change the tape out every day, and they would be stored in a fireproof safe. Now everything, including your phone, is just stored in a virtual cloud-based server. So that enables things when we have situations, like with the coronavirus here, the pandemic that we're in today, that allowed companies that did have those types of plans to immediately react and say, okay, take your computers home, take your laptops home, and work from home. And investing in that technology, and just really even having the ability to have reasonable cost the technology, where it's not that
Right.
expensive, that most businesses can maintain that cloud-based component, that they're able to instantly turn it on, because it's really no different than they were working in their office. Now you're just working off of a different internet connection from your home.
Right.
And especially on the accounting side of things, so important, for that cloud base, because, while maybe business might slow down, even if you were in a retail business and you had to shut your doors because of
Right.
some of the various governor orders, you still have to pay some bills. And those accounting records, by having them cloud-based, just allows you access to that, access to the financial statements. Hopefully there's still, if you weren't retail, but if you had checks coming into a lockbox, things of that nature, there's still that accounting aspect that has to go on. And, collections, getting invoices out if you need to invoice customers. Like I said, payables, that's always a thing too, that, everything is really just there, and be able to track, employees. That's another aspect of things, that you've got to have access. And we're seeing more and more companies that go to those cloud-based solutions for their accounting. And it's a win-win for everyone, quite honestly.
Yeah, we see it too. So obviously, you and I have chatted about it a number of times. From an E2B or C2B, whether it's cannabis or non-cannabis, we're doing a lot more. We're seeing, probably 60 to 70% of our new opportunities are our client base asking about the cloud. We're very invested in the Sage Intact solution, which is a cloud, 100% cloud SaaS-based solution. And with the cannabis side, the distribution, the manufacturing, cultivation, extraction, and so on, we've also put together that type of solution that it's all in the cloud. And I think we're all, while on-premise solutions still exist, we know that. The cloud is definitely something that, to your advice, or to your experience, I think is becoming more prevalent. So, again, I think that's good advice. So I'm going to kind of give you the last words here as we kind of get towards the bottom half of the hour, or the half hour. Just in general terms, what kind of, last piece of advice you give everybody? Obviously, we're all confident we're coming out of this somewhere down the road here, not too far along, hopefully. But just kind of in general, from your perspective, what you see as that last piece of advice, tax-wise, accounting-wise, whatever it is that Todd Tigas can pass along to this great audience.
Yeah, well, I think, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think really having a game plan is really so important, whether it be, how you bring back employees, if you had to lay off employees and possibly furlough your employees. How do you go about bringing them back? What is your game plan for once the market does start to open up? There's been talk of hopefully something is, as early as the first part of May,
right?
Where we start to see the economy turning back on. And how do you gear up? How are your inventory supplies if you're in manufacturing? How are you, are you stocked ready to be full production, or are we starting in a new phase-in approach? All that can't be determined unless you have a plan of action. Making sure your cash flow needs are such, and talking with customers, letting them know that, hey, maybe once things start back up, you're back in action, and how you communicate that. Is it email blasts? Is it similar to webinars such as this, and touching base with those customers to really kind of get them back to enable you get up to full production again and full steam. So that you get that cash flow coming back in on a regular basis. I think that's really, a game plan. Working with your CPA is so important in these times, for sure.
Right.
Whether it's working in conjunction with the bank to making sure you're participating in all the credits, loan programs, and everything else that are out there to help sustain business, is really going to go a long way, and could make the difference between businesses having to close their doors forever, or continue on and hopefully what'll be a ferocious third and fourth quarter where we're just going to see people have this pent up anxiety from being, kept in their homes, that hopefully as soon as they get back out, they'll be, ready and willing to spend, and really kind of help strengthen, bolster this economy so that we can get our unemployment back down. We can, get back up to full speed where we were just, a little over a month ago.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty amazing how quickly it turned around. And I feel the same way. I feel confident that will happen. And I'm hopeful so that, your shortened early tax season will now become a late, crazy fall tax season. So it'll be a little different for you. So I'm sure you're looking forward to that too.
We're definitely, it seems like it never ends right now anymore. There, something else will come into play too. So it's all good. And we're, I think we at UHY are here to service our clients too. I think that's so important, where we do a really good job communicating with them, keeping them up to speed, whether it be various e-alerts or, conversations to make sure that they are positioned to, on the comeback, and also for the SBA loans and even just helping manage their cash flow from a holistic approach.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think you've given us a lot of good information. It was good for the audience. I think around the 280E, around the CARES Act, around accounting. I mean, there was a lot in there we crammed into a half an hour. And I echo what you said. I think while, companies like ours are here to provide information and help, I don't think there's a replacement for the CPA firm. And I know you guys are offering webinars and doing things as well. And we encourage people to contact you or contact their CPA firm, as you did, right? Whoever that CPA firm is, I think that's important. So I thank you for your insight. I think the information was very helpful, and hopefully the audience was very helpful to you. And just a little bit of tidbit, again, us trying to bring a little bit to make everybody more informed every couple of days, and keep everybody coming. What you'll see on the screen, as we start to wind down, is some of our other upcoming webinars. We're going to talk about some legalities. That'll be a great follow-up to what we talked about today.
Sure.
But there's some others out there around different things that are going on. And there is a QR code if someone wants to scan it to help you register for the webinars. But again, I thank you, Todd. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be talking over the next few days about more things to come. Look forward to it, and be safe and take care of everything on your end.
Thanks, Frank.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Take care.